right, good morning. I was supposed to be standing in this spot about 10 minutes ago. I told JP and Andrew if they wanted to screw around and talk about the difference between two words, they had to do it quickly, and they didn't listen. I threatened to punch them, but they didn't listen, so that's how it's going to go down. I guess we'll have to do that later. If this is your first time here, my name's Adam. I'm the lead pastor here, and I do threaten violence pretty often. I'm sorry. If you're just here watching somebody get baptized, we are really happy you're here. We're excited to get to that part of the service. And because of that part of the service, I do have to preach a little faster. So instead of shortening my content, I just figured I'd talk faster. Hope you're with me today. So I want to start with a quote this morning by a guy named Andy Stanley. He's a pastor of a church down in Atlanta, really cool guy. He says this: "A single act of courage is often the tipping point for something extraordinary." A single act of courage is often the tipping point for something extraordinary. Just one courageous act can be the beginning of something absolutely amazing. Take Rosa Parks, for example. Her single act of courage by not giving up her seat on a bus, she was the tipping point in the battle for civil rights and racial equality in our country. Just one courageous act, she became a civil rights icon and a symbol for standing up for what's right in the face of massive opposition. Now, it's easy for us to look back on that moment and see how important that moment was, right? Because we, standing where we are, can see all the stuff that followed that moment and see how important it was. But she would have never known that, right? When she was in the moment, she would have known the magnitude of the moment. She didn't wake up that morning thinking, you know what, I'm going to become a historical icon today. You know, she didn't do that. She didn't wake up thinking, I'm going to wake up and be the tipping point in the battle for racial equality and change the face of race relations in the United States forever. But first, let me get a Pop-Tart. Like, that was not how her morning went, right? She had no idea. The magnitude of the moment was not apparent in the moment. This is so important for us. Because I think a lot of times we don't see the implications of a single act of courage because we can't see the magnitude of the moment. We pre-decide that we're not at a tipping point moment. We pre-decide that it won't do much. We pre-decide that it's not going to matter that much. And we get kind of a why bother attitude when it comes to potential moments of courage. We talk ourselves out of it. Because it's really hard to tell when you're at a tipping point moment in your life. And this is really important because, man, everything that happens at a tipping point moment has magnified implications, right? Everything, when things are teetering, everything you do has heightened consequences, right? One little act could tip it one way or tip it another way. Think about this. The difference between ice and water is just 1 degree. Right? 1 degree difference between ice and water. 1 degree makes a massive change. Anywhere else on the thermometer, 1 degree hardly matters at all, right? But at that key 32 degrees, everything changes. The difference between 32 degrees and 33 degrees is the difference between a glacier and a giant drop of water, right? The tipping point is huge. The implications of what happens at that tipping point are huge. So what I want to talk about today is a story about 2 men who stood at the most important tipping point in human history, and their one act of courage has had massive implications for us, and I want to learn from them. I want us to look at them and see how we can live our lives like they did and make the same decisions they did. So if you would pray with me, we're going to jump right into that story. Lord Jesus, I thank you for today. I thank you for the baptisms that are going to happen today, Lord. I'm so excited to see some people take that next step in their faith. I pray that as we look at these 2 guys who in a moment had courage and changed the face of history because of that, Lord, I pray that we would learn from them. I pray that we'd be inspired by them. And I pray that we would live our lives the same way they did. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So when Jesus walked the earth, there was this group of guys called the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were the religious leaders of that day. And if you're familiar with the Bible, man, they butted heads with Jesus all the time, right? They butted heads with Jesus all the time. And ultimately, like, they're responsible for Jesus' death. The Pharisees were the ones who turned Jesus over to the Romans to be crucified. So really, this is on the Pharisees. And if you grew up in church, you know that in Christian circles, to call somebody a Pharisee is a really big insult. Talk about my mama, call me a Pharisee. They're right there. These are high insults. So if you're new to church, you want to insult somebody, Pharisee. You can hit them with that, though. They will not like it, I promise. So the Pharisees, they've gotten a bad rap. But listen, you need to know this. They weren't all bad. Not all of the Pharisees were bad. Matter of fact, a couple of the Pharisees, at least a couple, had some genuine curiosity about Jesus. One of them was named Nicodemus. And Nicodemus, we meet him in John chapter 3. And Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night. He wants to ask Jesus some questions, but he comes at night because he doesn't want his Pharisees buddies to know that he's talking to Jesus. He's embarrassed. He's a little bit confused about this stuff, so he doesn't want anybody to know he's doing it. So he comes under the cover of darkness to ask Jesus some questions. Now, what you need to know is, as they talked, is keep in mind the Pharisees were really big on behavior. Really big on behavior. They were all about following all of the laws in the Old Testament. Matter of fact, they were so into that, they made laws around the laws and laws around those laws to make sure they never got close to actually breaking any of the laws. So when Nicodemus comes to Jesus, he comes with that mindset, and what he wants to know who Jesus is, but what he really wants to know is, what does he have to do to have a relationship with God? He's all about behavior. What can I do to have this relationship with God, and what can I do to get into heaven? This is what Nicodemus wants to know. And Jesus, when he answers Nicodemus, completely surprises him. Nicodemus would have never guessed how Jesus answers that question. Jesus tells Nicodemus that you don't behave your way into a relationship with God. You believe your way into a relationship with God. You don't behave your way into heaven, you believe your way into heaven. It's not about doing a bunch of stuff and not doing a bunch of stuff. It's about belief. It's about faith. And in this conversation, Jesus tells Nicodemus this very famous verse, and you don't have to have ever gone to church a day in your life to have heard of this verse. It's John 3:16. And I know as Christians we get so used to hearing this verse, but this verse happened in the context of this secret meeting between Nicodemus and Jesus, where Nicodemus is asking Jesus, how do I have a relationship with God? What can I do? And Jesus is back to him, for this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. Believes. So Nicodemus asking, how can I have a relationship with God? Jesus says, believe in me. Believe in Jesus. Jesus is the thing that will give you the relationship with God. Jesus is the person who will get you into heaven. It's belief in Jesus. Not a list of things you need to do, not some behavior that you need to have. It's belief in Jesus. So that conversation, I believe that conversation messed Nicodemus up, because that rocks his world. He was all about what do I got to do? Tell me the different things I got to do. I'm going to do whatever I need to do. And Jesus says, no, put the list away, man. Just believe in me. Just believe in me. Put it down. Stop trying. Stop doing all that stuff. Just believe. And I think something happened in Nicodemus's heart during this conversation. I think Nicodemus began to have faith in Jesus. He still had questions. He was still uncertain about some things, but I think there was a spark of faith in his heart after this very important conversation that he has with Jesus. Now, fast forward about 4 chapters from John chapter 3 to John chapter 7. The Pharisees at this point, so the group of Pharisees, they send the temple guard to go arrest Jesus. They're sick of Jesus, tired of having to argue with him. He's mouthing off to them. They're done with him. They want to arrest him. So they send the temple guard to go arrest Jesus. And in chapter 7, verse 45, the temple guard come back, and here's what happens. When the temple guard returned without having arrested Jesus, the leading priests and the Pharisees demand, why didn't you bring him in? So they come back empty-handed, they don't have him. And the Pharisees are like, what's going on? Did he run? Did he hide? Did his disciples fight you off? Do you guys beat up a little bit? They want to know, why didn't you bring this guy in? And here's how the temple guard respond. This is awesome. We have never heard anyone speak like this, the guard respond. Never heard anybody speak. So it wasn't that Jesus ran. It wasn't that he hid. It wasn't that they fought him off. They were getting close to arresting him, and they started listening. And they heard the way he spoke, and something started to happen. He blew them away with the way he taught and how he carried himself. And something starts to happen in their hearts. So they stop and they're like, man, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we shouldn't grab this guy. Maybe maybe he is who he says he is. Like, I don't know, but man, something's happened in my heart when I hear him speak. Let's not arrest him. Let's not arrest him. So they go back to the Pharisees and they tell him like, hey, it's because of the way he teaches. Like, maybe we should give this guy a chance. And here's how the Pharisees respond in verse 47. Have you been led astray too? The Pharisees mocked. Is there a single one of us rulers or Pharisees who believes in him? So like an unnamed Pharisee steps forward when they come back without Jesus and they say, dude, like he just teaches, like there's something about him. One of these guys steps forward and says, hey, idiots, basically. This is my interpretation. Hey, idiots, does any one of us religious leaders, all of us standing here who, actually know what we're talking about, do any of us believe in Jesus? Do any of us? Now keep in mind, when he steps forward and says that, you know who's behind him? Nicodemus. Nicodemus is in this crowd of people where this guy just spread his arms out and said, do any of us believe him? And Nicodemus is standing back here in the crowd. And here it is. He's at a tipping point moment right here. He just got called out. Do any of us believe? And right now, man, he could make a huge, monumentous, extraordinary act with a simple act of courage. Something amazing could happen. He could be like, you know what? I do. I know you're trying to make a point, dude, but man, when Jesus speaks, something happens in my heart, and I've asked him some questions, and I still have more questions, and I don't understand everything, but man, I believe, for what it's worth, I believe in Jesus. I don't know what that means, but I do. He could do that at this point, right here at the tipping point of this event. Nicodemus could step up. And man, that could be the beginning of something. The temple guard could start to believe because Nicodemus kind of gave them permission. Other Pharisees could step forward and be like, I wasn't going to say anything. But now that Nicodemus has opened the door up, man, when he talks, something happens in my heart too. Like there's something to it. We need to talk to this Jesus guy. Like maybe we need to really consider this. Nicodemus right here, if he just could act in courage, could tip everything and turn this angry group of men maybe to not be so angry. Just one act of courage. But he doesn't. He doesn't. I'll call what he does, he hedges. Starting in verse 50, here's what happens. Then Nicodemus, the leader who had met with Jesus earlier, spoke up. Is it legal to convict a man before he's given a hearing? He asked. And they replied, are you from Galilee too? Search the scriptures and see for yourself. No prophet ever comes from Galilee. So that little comeback, I like whoever's talking. Like whatever Pharisee this is, this guy has the same kind of personality as me. He's really snarky and angry. But what he just said back to Nicodemus is, hey, haven't you read the scriptures? Because all the prophecies say that the Messiah is going to come from Bethlehem and Jesus is from Galilee, so shut up. But that Pharisee had not done his homework because Jesus was born in Bethlehem, not Galilee. He moved to Galilee later, so his insult did not have homework attached to it. If you're going to insult somebody, know what you're talking about. That's the lesson there. But if you look back at what Nicodemus said, it's like, dude, you had this chance. If you would have been courageous, if you would have said, I believe, there's something to this, he could have put his weight behind it. But instead, he waffles, he wavers, and he kind of wants to play that middle ground. Shouldn't we maybe give him a chance or something? He doesn't actually take a firm stance. And it does nothing. The degrees, it doesn't go from 32 degrees to 33 degrees with that kind of a statement. The hearts stay frozen because he wasn't courageous. He didn't move here. He wussed out. So you know that feeling you get when you miss an opportunity? You know that gross feeling, the feeling of regret, the feeling of guilt, the feeling like you're a total and utter failure. You know that feeling, that cold, dirty feeling, oh man, it was right, that opportunity was right there, and I could, all I had to do was reach out, and I didn't, and you just feel terrible. I think that's how Nicodemus feels here, because he pretty much gets backhanded. And then he just kind of has to shut up because he didn't speak boldly the first time. Now he's got to back up. And he's got this horrible feeling of regret. And to make things worse, not very long after this, Jesus is killed. And the Pharisees, that group that Nicodemus is a part of, are a huge part of getting Jesus killed. So they hand him over to the Romans. The Romans mock him, staple him to a cross, let him hang there until he suffocates and dies. And I think Nicodemus watched. I think he was there. I think he saw it. And I think, there had to be this, man, what if I would have spoke up? What if I would have said something, not that, but something better, something more like strong, more courageous? I wonder if I could have turned this group from hating Jesus to maybe like giving him a chance. I wonder, like he had to have all of that going on inside of him. A pit in his stomach because he missed it. He missed it. He missed his opportunity. He missed that tipping point moment. But the story's not over yet. You know that. The story's not over. Just because Jesus is dead doesn't mean the story is over. And Nicodemus' story isn't over yet either. So here's the deal. When Jesus dies on the cross, here's what's supposed to happen next. When Rome would crucify people in Jerusalem, once that person was dead, they would rip them back down off of the cross. They'd put them in a rough cart. They'd wheel them through the city of Jerusalem to this valley called Gehenna, which was basically the city trash heap, the city like sewage dump. It was just a nasty, horrible place. Most of it was on fire like all the time. It just burned all the time. The other parts that weren't burning had rats and maggots. Like pretty much the worst place you could ever imagine in your entire life. Like Jesus actually used this valley as an example for what hell would be like when he was talking to people. He's like, hey, you know that valley? That's what hell's gonna be like. Like it was that nasty. And that is where Jesus is supposed to end up. They're supposed to wheel him over there and dump his body into that valley on a trash heap. That's what's supposed to happen to Jesus. But our boy Nicodemus is going to get another crack at a tipping point moment right here. Because I believe as he watches Jesus die, something happens in his heart again. Something bubbles up, that spark maybe turns into a flame, and man, he turns to his buddy who's named Joseph, and they had to have had this conversation. It's not in the Bible, but they had to have had this conversation. Something like Nicodemus going, Joseph, dude, we can't let them throw him in a trash heap. We can't, man, we can't do that. Like we should have stopped it before it happened, and now we just can't let it end like that. Some kind of conversation had to happen where Nicodemus says, dude, we got to go public with our faith. We got to come out. We got to let the world know that we believed in him. We failed him when he was alive. Let's not fail him when he's dead. And they have this conversation. And if I'm Joseph, I'm kind of like, dude, now? Like, he's dead. Like, can't we just keep the secret? Like, what's the point? But man, somehow these two have this conversation and they decide, you know what? We're going to go public with our faith. We're not going to hide anymore. Let's go ask the Roman governor for Jesus' body. And that's what they do in chapter 19, starting in verse 38. Afterwards, Joseph of Arimathea, who had been a secret disciple of Jesus because he feared the Jewish leaders, asked Pilate for permission to take down Jesus' body. When Pilate gave permission, Joseph came and took the body away. With him came his buddy, Nicodemus, the man who had come to Jesus at night. He brought about 75 pounds of perfume ointment made from myrrh and aloe. So Nicodemus and Joseph marched down to the Roman governor once Jesus is dead, and they ask for Jesus' body, which from the outside is outrageous if you're not one of those two. I mean, think about this, how this comes off to Pilate. Like yesterday, you guys were a part of the group, the Pharisees, who like made me kill him. And now today, you're standing here asking for his body. Like, what's up, guys? Where were you yesterday? Like, why are you changing? What changed overnight? Well, what changed is they decided to be courageous and go public with their faith. Let the world know that they believed in Jesus. Even though he was dead, they wanted everybody to know that they followed him. Simple act of courage and obedience to a nudge from God. This was the tipping point for something extraordinary. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, why is this a tipping point? What does it matter where Jesus was left? Trash heap, tomb, who cares? Who cares? Well, listen. Imagine for a second if the resurrection had taken place in Gehenna rather than a tomb. What does that look like? Imagine if Jesus had crawled out of this valley, smelling horrible, rat bites all over him. Hey guys, like that's how it would have went if he would have been in the valley. Now, if that had happened, it would have been incredible still, but explainable, right? That's explainable. If Jesus crawls out of Gehenna, I believe the narrative would go, well, what they did was they didn't make sure he was dead. So really what they dumped Jesus, who was still alive, into that valley, and he crawled out because he had never died. The narrative would be they didn't kill him. He was only mostly dead, right? He was mostly dead. He wasn't all the way dead. And he revived himself over 3 days, and now here he is. The narrative would be that he had not died. But because he was taken by two men who believed in him and would have been looking for signs of life as they carried his body, they would have been making, like, is he breathing? No, like check his pulse, like just make sure. Like maybe we can run off with him. Like they would have been checking to see if maybe there was something there. And then they take this 75 pounds of perfume ointment and myrrh and aloes and all that stuff. And verse 40 says, following the Jewish burial custom, they wrap Jesus' body with the spices in long sheets of linen cloth. So even if somehow these two were so boneheaded as to miss that Jesus was still alive, they wrap him up real tight, which would have suffocated him. And then they dump this oil and spices and stuff on him, which basically would be like waterboarding somebody who was unconscious. He would have died, right? If he wasn't dead yet, they finished him off here, which is horrible to think. Nicodemus and Joseph made sure history knew a very important fact. That Jesus died. Jesus died. And you might be like, why is that an important role? Well, to have a resurrection, you got to have a death. To come back to life, you have to be dead first. So as unglamorous as that role might be, it was an important one. The accusation that Jesus did not die is a very silly accusation because of Joseph and Nicodemus. And they also put Jesus in a tomb, which could be effectively guarded, unlike the Valley of Gehenna. Pilate sent troops to stand guard by this tomb, which, if you've ever heard that silly theory that, well, the disciples came and stole the body, that's why, like, the third day he wasn't there. Like, consider what you're saying. You're saying that a group of uneducated fishermen outsmarted a group of the best trained soldiers on the planet and stole the body. No, that's stupid. Like, that's absurd. He was in a tomb with a stone in front of it and troops around it. There's no way they could have stolen it. Jesus was dead. And everyone thought the story was over. That's the other part. Nobody was sitting at the tomb early Sunday morning going 5, 4, wait for it, 3, here he comes, 2. Like that wasn't happening, right? They all gave up, all of them. And by the way, if you've ever heard the theory that, well, the disciples just made this story up, well, like, can you just come with me for a minute? Don't you think it's weird that if they made the story up, that they made a story up that they're all idiots? Like that they're all cowards and faithless? Like not one of them had any amount of faith at all when he died. Like if you're gonna lie, wouldn't you lie at least in kind of a positive light about yourself? Like, oh dude, like I really did believe, I wasn't there. But like none of them say that. They all are just honest because they're reporting what happened in an honest way, not making up a story. Because if you make up a story, you'd make up something different. So he's dead. Everybody knows it. Troops are there guarding this tomb. And Sunday morning, the book of Luke tells us that 2 ladies come to put spices on the body, which is weird because you're like, wait a minute. They already did it. Like Nicodemus and Joseph already put spices on the body. Why would women come and put spices on the body again? Like that doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. Any guys who are married? You ever load the dishwasher and have your wife fix it? Yeah. You ever clean something, ever come back through and clean it again because you didn't really clean it? Yeah. You ever put something away and she says you put it away wrong, I'm going to do it again? Yeah, right? This is easily explained. So these 2 women, right? Nicodemus and Joseph do it, and these 2 women are like, we're going to go fix whatever it is that we don't even know, but we're going to fix this. I'm not kidding. This is really the way it went down. And you could give them some credit. Like Joseph and Nicodemus were in a hurry. They were shell-shocked. They were completely out of it. So these 2 women are coming to like legitimately, like, let's just make sure this is done right. And when they get there, Jesus wasn't there. He had risen from the dead, the most important event in human history. And one of the only reasons you know about it 2,000 years later is because of a single act of courage from a guy named Nicodemus and a guy named Joseph. Their simple act of courage ripples throughout history and enables us to know that not only did Jesus die, but he came back to life as well. And I promise, in that moment, when they walked up to Pilate and said, I believed in Jesus, I want his body, I promise they did not know the magnitude of the moment when they were doing it. They thought he was dead. They thought the story was over. They just wanted to make a statement. They wanted to be like courageous just because they felt like they needed to. They didn't know the magnitude of the moment in the moment. They didn't know. So here's what this means for you. I want you to live your life in a courageous way, as if every moment is a tipping point moment, as if every moment might ripple throughout history, because you don't know. You don't know when you're standing in a moment that could be a tipping point moment where the slightest act of courage could tip things one way or the other. So I believe that if you're a Christian today, that what Nicodemus and Joseph did on a grand scale, you can do on a small scale. While Nicodemus and Joseph going public with their faith made them instrumental in the tipping point of the most important event in history, you going public with your faith can make you instrumental in the tipping point for someone's soul. You hear me? A single act of courage, you could be the tipping point in someone's soul. You could be the thing that causes them to go, you know what? There is something to this guy. Man, he is who he says he is. Your life lived out loud, you going public with your faith, living your faith intentionally out in the open could be the thing that brings someone's heart from 32 degrees to 33 degrees. Your life of faith could be the thing that tips someone's heart to believe and changes their eternal destiny. It could ripple not just through years or decades, but eternity if you live your faith out loud. So, if you've been living your life as a secret Christian like Joseph and Nicodemus, I mean, the Bible says they were living secret followers of Jesus. That's what they were. The Bible acknowledges that that's a thing. Like, you can be a Christian and keep it hidden. You can. But the Bible also tells, man, the moment you say, you know what, I want the world to know this, something happens, man. That God will use that to change other people's lives. Today's the day. You need to go public with your faith. Let the people in your life know that you trust Jesus, who you believe he is, what you believe he did. That is your next spiritual step. So this is the end of this series, and I just want to encourage you that if you've done all this other stuff, or even if you haven't done all the other stuff, I want to encourage you to say, you know what, I'm going to live my life out in the open as a Christian. I'm going to go public with my faith and let the world know that I believe in Jesus. I believe that he died, I believe that he rose again, and I believe that has massive implications for me. Live out loud. Go public. Now, maybe you feel like you already messed that up, like, right? You're like, oh man, I already missed my tipping points. Yeah, that's cool. So did Nicodemus, right? Chapter 7, Nicodemus missed his opportunity, and chapter 19, he didn't miss it. So don't let missing an opportunity before be the reason you miss the one in the future. You don't have to screw up in the past and cause it to make you screw up in the future. It's okay if you messed up in chapter 7. Don't mess up chapter 19. And maybe you feel like you're going to be asked questions that you don't know the answer to. I was talking about this in Thrive Group, and everybody pretty much said the same thing. Like, what if they ask me something that I don't know? And listen, that's legitimately possible. But here's what I want you to know. There's another story in the Bible where a guy gets asked a bunch of questions that he doesn't know the answer to, and you know how he responds? I don't know. But here's what I do. I was blind, and now I can see. This was my life before I knew Jesus, and this is my life after. This is my heart before I knew Jesus, and this is my heart after. This is my fulfillment before I knew Jesus, and this is my fulfillment after. You just tell him what you've experienced. Because I want you to know, no one has ever been argued into the kingdom of heaven. No one has ever been like, you know what? You finally pinned me on all those arguments, I believe. Like, that's never happened. Never. They'll be more impacted by your story, by you just saying, this is who I was and this is who I am. This is what I used to believe and this is what I do believe. They'll be more impacted by that than you by being some apologetics master. Just tell them your faith. And then maybe your last thing would be like, but what if they say yes? What do I do then? Like, what if they actually want to believe in Jesus? It'd be like catching a fish and not knowing what to do with it. Like, I don't even know what to do. Listen, this is how simple it is. Romans 10, 9 and 10. If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you are made right with God, and it is by openly declaring your faith that you are saved. It is that simple. It is that simple. Just like Jesus told Nicodemus, you don't behave your way into a relationship with God. You believe your way into a relationship with God. You don't behave your way into heaven, you believe your way into heaven. That's the tipping point. That's the difference between 32 degrees and 33 degrees right there. This is your opportunity to be the tipping point in someone's soul. That simple act of courage, to see that heart go from 32 to 33, to change their eternal destiny, to ripple into eternity. And since you don't know which moment could be a tipping point in the people in your lives' hearts, you just need to live this way all the time. You need to live your life in a courageous, public faith. Now, I got to end because we got stuff to do. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you if you don't believe in Jesus yet. Maybe today is your tipping point moment. If you don't trust in Jesus yet and you're sitting here and man, something's happening right here, that's real. That's not emotion. That's not you making something up because you haven't been to church in a while. That's real. That's God getting after you. So if today is the day and you need to put your faith, your trust in Jesus, do not leave here without doing that. Do not leave here without doing that. The Bible says that you've got this gaping hole in your heart, that you've been dissatisfied your whole life. I don't have to know you to know that's true. So if you've got that and you're ready to finally find the thing that might actually satisfy that, don't leave here without doing it. The answer is Jesus. Jesus is the one who can fulfill that. He's the only one. So don't leave here without that. I'm going to pray. And if you need to accept Jesus and you need somebody to walk you through what this right here looks like, I want you to, as soon as I'm done praying, the band's gonna come out and they're gonna sing one last song. But man, get up and walk out. There's gonna be some people at that yellow tent to talk to you and pray with you. If you need to take that step today, man, do that simple act of courage. It could be the beginning of something crazy extraordinary.
Seen life through the eyes of a different soul. I left my past so my future would be under control.